Good. Well, it looks like good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us today. Really, Agile London is really flexing the power of technology on this one. We've got people, speakers and people joining us from around the world on this one. So thank you very much for joining us today and welcome. So just a couple of house rules before we kick off. Can I just ask everyone on the call to remain on mute throughout the session? It really allows for our speakers and the fluidity of the event for them to speak clearly without any interruptions. And so everyone else who joins this call is able to listen to them as well. Yes, so I know, in addition to that, I do actively encourage questions, would really like to encourage engagement from you all. If you do have any questions for Lizzie and or Sunil this evening, please post them to me privately in the chat and I will ask them to either or both speakers at the end. So joining us this, well, what is lunchtime in the UK, early morning in Texas and evening in Singapore, we've got Lizzy Morris. She's currently in Texas. She's an agile transformation coach, leadership strategist, and executive life coach. Her talk this morning to her, lunchtime to us, is Agility of Everyday Living. Then we've got Sunil Mundra. He is author of Enterprise Agility and principal consultant and advisory at ThoughtWorks. He's joining us from Singapore this evening, and his talk is Principles of Agile Governance. So I'm going to hand you over to Lizzy now, who is speaking first. Lizzy, do you want to just screen share again?
There we go.
Fantastic. Okay, Lizzy, your audio is good. Screen looks good.
Awesome.
Over to you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you all for having me. It's kind of nice to be home without being home. But the only downside to all that is that obviously I don't have the food. We were just discussing, I don't have the food while we're here, right? I've just got to imagine the fact that I've got me some really good starch in front of me with some, you know, and I'm thinking like sticky toffee pudding right now with some really good Marks and Sparks custard. And that would be like a real good start to the day, because then I'm going to go on my bike after this and then I could work it off. It'd be like brilliant, right? But since not, we are here. And I want to take us through the idea of applying the concepts of Agile for everyday living. As you guys have heard, I'm a life coach, and I brought over a lot of the principles of the Agile Manifesto into my life coaching practice. And it started prior to me being qualified to kind of be the whole life coach, right? It started with when I started doing transformations, I noticed I would bump into people not being who they are, and they didn't even recognize it. And as a result from that, the problems we would bump into at a leadership level would always be able to be traced back, right, to the organization. So it was like what was at the top was what was going on in the organization. If leaders were really tight and like kind of very resistant to change and untrusting, you'd go into teams and you'd see the same behavior replicated. And then I realized once I started coaching the executives and helping them understand that you can do change, change is okay, it's not going to kill you. The situations in your life where you had no control before are not the same as this. Because a lot of times what people are doing is projecting areas where they had no control in life. They now take these things that are handed to them and they control them like this because it makes them feel like they're filling those gaps. So when it comes to us, one of the things I've observed is in our ability to pick so many different frameworks, right, and advise organizations and kind of be this for this organization and this for this organization and this for this team and this for another team, we have a tendency a lot of times to start becoming our personas, right? So I want to bring us to the fact of challenging us on this, on actually taking the masks off, right? So let me give you my hypothesis. My hypothesis is this: we all tend to wear masks well, like most people do. And recognizing that we tend to wear masks well is probably the first beginning. So if you think about when you work with teams and you're building products, right? You help them put together personas of possible users. You take the data echoes that they've got and you craft this focused human that they begin to build for. Well, one of the reasons we kind of take these masks on is because we perceive that organizations want certain types of coaches, certain types of agilists. So then we take on those masks. Even if we don't believe in some of the things we say it, we're going to say it anyway because that's what they kind of want to hear. And at the end of the day, a lot of us as agilists are independent freelancers in essence. So the drive to provide is one of the reasons why the masks stay on, right? So when we think about that, here's my hypothesis. One, we've all become really skilled at building our personas, right? Really, really skilled at it. And because we're so skilled at doing this morphing that we have started doing is almost instinctive. So, you know, when you go into an organization and you know, okay, these people are just crazy. We're not going to be able to get them organized right away. There's just too much going on and there's too many demands and there's too many number ones. We will reach into our toolkit for something to use to get them going for just right now. Okay, so like maybe the first thing we'll do is introduce Moscow prioritization. I can't even take them any deeper. Let's just say, what do you think of the stuff you must do? And, you know, and we'll take them through this. That's kind of where we'll start them. But in doing that, there's another mask we take on, right? It's that mask of the facilitator. And that idea of suddenly becoming the politician between lots of different entities in the organization to try to get them to come together. Well, when we do this, this is something I ask executives all the time, right? What could happen instead? It's a real big kind of coachy question, right? Well, what could this be like instead? What's the dream? And I love to take people to the dream, right? And my phrase that I use, and feel free to use it, is if I gave you a magic stick and you could go abracadabra, what would this really be like? What would this company be like? What would you be like if there was no constraints? If you could just be kind of who your passion on the inside is leading you to be? Well, when I say that to people, what is interesting, right, is there is this innate pause that happens. I get that look, first of all, like I'm real crazy, like, you know, you're just a little bit out there. But then they kind of go into that thought. And when they look on who they could be instead, I'm able to start getting people to take the masks off. Now, let me paint you a scenario back of when we were going in and out of client sites, right? Think about it. You drive up or you get off, you kind of get out the train, right? And you walk up to the client's site. Regardless of what's been going on with you as a human, right? If your relationships weren't that great that day, kids tear your hair out, you know, if you're feeling like you're not doing what you're really passionate about, all that stuff, you just kind of push down and boom, here I come, professional coach. And you walk into the business and you're smiling at everybody and you're engaging, right? But you have taken who you are and all the facets of who you are, and you've kind of pulled them away to take on this mask. Now, here is where I took creative liberty, okay? On taking what we know and now think about applying it to ourselves. You're going to see my creative liberty in a second. So let's look at the first thing. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, okay? Well, if I first think about me, the interactions I'm having in my personal life, the interactions that make my life, that make my space, work is only one of them. But what I'm doing when I'm insisting on wearing this mask is putting the process of my career and what I do and my toolkit ahead of myself, which means when I'm trying to really have authentic interaction, it's not there because I'm not there. Instead, the process of agility, the process of coaching, and my toolkit is really what's being presented most of the time instead of me presenting myself. Well, what if, right, we went and we started responding to life over following the career plan? COVID has made people do this. Not because we wanted to, but it kind of went, right? And it brought us into this big pause, and we've had to do this. But have we even been conscious that this is what we're doing? And are we now really collaborating with customers if we're not able to bring ourselves to the table? Is it collaboration, or is it really contract negotiation? Well, I've got a contract to teach them this, to lay out this framework, to get the organization to doing this. So I really don't have time to collaborate as myself. I got to be about this contract. Keeping those behaviors of what I would call the other side of the value system keeps us trapped and puts those masks further and further and further, digging like into the back of your ears, right? Rather than allowing you to kind of come free from them. But what if you said, I'm going to put working life. Now, when I say working life, I don't mean the job. I mean a life that is existing, that is working at its optimal, above comprehensive documentation. So above what it supposedly should be, what everybody else prescribes to your life. What if you put your personal ecosystem of your dreams, your health, because we really do allow our health to suffer a lot as coaches, right? Because we go, 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 go. What if we put what it is we really want to be on the inside ahead of all these things that everybody else has prescribed for us to do? What could it look like? So here's a couple of steps that you guys could go through to kind of make this happen. You could, one, pause, inspect, and take off the mask. Because if you notice, I choose a really kind of mangled mask that's saying a lot, because we have got so many of them, it's hard to understand which one you're wearing at what time. But what if you just take it off? And then what if you dare to check in with yourself, you? Because if you can check in with yourself, right, you can kind of look in the mirror and understand who's looking back at you, like who you are right now. And when you see who you are in the mirror, you can then begin to assess your route. Like, is the route you've currently chosen for your life, for your career, is this still the path that you want moving forward? Like, is this really working for you? And if it's not working for you, then it's time to find your balance. And I've got this picture because I think it's really cool, right? The idea of on the head, but you notice she's still got her hands there. So it's the concept of balancing your way. Balance for you can never be prescribed by anybody else. Even in our families, there's times people want to kind of, shift the balance and say, well, you should be this, you should be doing this, you should spend more time doing this. But you've got to understand, where is the value factor for you right now? What is it? What's really valuable for you? And if you don't know what's really valuable for you, what are you spending most of your time doing? Wherever you're spending most of your time, whether you're conscious of it or not, that's really where you're saying your value is at. So if that is not where you want your value to be, then it's time for you to reassess and make your adaptations. If you're willing to make those adaptations, and even if they're just small, you'll notice you'll start to get breathing room. One of the things, an epiphany that came to me a couple of weeks ago, was intentions and expectations are both invisible. You can have the best intention of the world for yourself, for your family, for your career. But if there's no actions weighted by those intentions, your intentions are never realized. They're just invisible. If there's expectations you have of the company you're working for them to do certain things for you, for them to provide certain opportunities, and those aren't being provided, if you haven't articulated those expectations, they remain invisible. So, when we look now, this is the first time I'm using Prezi, guys, so I'm inspecting and adapting with this. I want this thing to go back to the main thing. Hold on one second. Here's the conclusion. Number one, the human in you is valuable. We always talk about technology, the value, building the right product, finding the next wow. But none of those things can happen if we can't focus in on the humans, because customers are human. No technology exists without a human wanting to consume it. If there are no humans to consume anything, there is no cycle of life that's going to drive anything. Won't drive return on investment, won't drive a better standard of living, nothing will happen. But if we can come to the place now where we can say, our humanity is beautiful, me first. And it sounds selfish, right? But here's the thing, if you can't pause to understand what it is you need, it makes it very hard for you to provide to other people the best that you could possibly do. Because the best comes out of the spirit of who you are, not what you do. So I am challenging us to come away from the concept of, this is what I do for a living, and come to the concept of, this is who I am and what I bring to the table. I have found in my own career, where I've been my most creative, come up with the best ever strategies, when I've allowed myself to show up. Now, trust me, I didn't do this overnight, so please, right? I'm like in my late 40s now, kicking up into the 50s zone. So it's taken me a while to get to this kind of thing, like, shoot, you know what? I'm all right. I got some stuff going on here. I can bring me in on this, right? Took me a while to get here, right? I've gone through the whole parenting 6 children. They've gone on to do their life. And I'm like, hey, how about me now? What do I really love to do? I sat on my couch, my birthday was in July. I turned my phone off, right? For the whole entire day, like the whole day. My phone was off my whole birthday. And I just sat on my couch with one of my fleecy blankets. I love fleecy blankets, right? And so I had a special fleecy blanket that I had, and I took out all my fleecy pajamas, and I kind of did a fleecy fashion show for the day, right? Took a shower, put on a new set of fleecy whatsits and a nice perfume. Later on, had another shower, and I changed into another set of fleecy pajamas. And I just enjoyed me. And when I took that pause, I realized it had been 14 years since I have been at my house and in my bed on a consistent basis. 14 years. And I hadn't realized every second day I've been on an airplane, that's been my life, right? And I've been in some foreign country in the world doing what I thought I was really passionate about. But I realized that wasn't where my passion was anymore. I was no longer feeding my soul, although I'm still was doing so many great things. And when I took the pause to find out, well, what do I want to do now? I realized what I want to do now is help people be themselves. And I can take agility and the frameworks to help people unpack who they are and find the value that is really them for today. I have this mantra that I use with my clients, and I say this: who you were yesterday is not who you are today. And who you'll be tomorrow is not who you are right now. And that's okay. But it's becoming in touch with that. So you move away from self-judgment. And just like you tell your clients, it's not a failure, right? It's an experiment from which you've now learned what not to do. So the things we've done in the past that really haven't brought value to who you are, great, we've learned from that. But now, if you start becoming in contact with your intentions and honest about your expectations, you can begin to live life truly on the journey of authenticity, which means you'll be able to help organizations at a much higher level now find what is their authentic self. So transformations that most of us do for a living won't just be ticks in the boxes, but they will become organic flows of true continuous improvement. And it's something you'll be able to teach and exemplify because it's something you'll bring into your own everyday life. So that's us taking the mask off and doing Agile for everyday living.
Lizzy, thank you very much for that. I thought that was absolutely superb. Really enjoyed hearing from you on that talk. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, a couple of questions have come in for you, Lizzy, but as I said at the beginning, I will ask them at the end. I am now going to pass over to Sunil Mundra, and Sunil is author of Enterprise Agility, and he is a principal consultant with ThoughtWorks. Sunil, over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Let me just give me a minute to share my screen. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be a part of this meetup. I was just telling Alex that it's a great feeling to be back in London, even if virtually so. I was in London for a year in 2016 and spoke at a couple of conferences there at that time. One of the greatest cities in the world, one of my favorite. I look forward to the COVID crisis getting over and being able to be in London anytime after that very soon. Also a disclaimer that Lizzy's presentation was deep, was personally touching. Mine is going to be fortunately or unfortunately much drier. So please be ready for the mental shift that you would need to make to get into a different mode of presentation, right? Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is principles of agile governance. But before I do that, let me just quickly talk about myself, although Alex did a very generous introduction. But I have 31 years of experience, of which 20 years is in information technology. And I'm very happy to say that I just completed 10 years with ThoughtWorks a couple of weeks ago. And my current areas of expertise are obviously enterprise agility, transformation, and leadership coaching is an integral part of that, which I also enjoy doing a lot. In terms of thought leadership, yeah, this is my book, the cover of the book. It was a new release, a bestseller on Amazon in a couple of categories. And I'm also happy to say that spoken at about 30 plus conferences, including the one at London. And I'm lucky to have spoken across all the 6 continents. So with that, let's try and understand before we get into the principles about the difference between the characteristics of waterfall and agile governance. Many of us come from a waterfall background, and I'm sure we would be able to relate to some of these things. Again, I'm not commenting in terms of being good or bad. Things were the way they were for a reason. What we need to look at now is, do those things make sense, right? So here's some of the things that waterfall values or are characteristics related to waterfall related governance, right? What are you valuing? You're valuing forecast accuracy. All right. You have a business case and you have to forecast how much you're going to spend, and you're being monitored on how much you are spending. Now, I have come across a couple of organizations, including one in UK, a multi-billion dollar organization, where you would be penalized for either overspending even a pound or even underspending a pound. Why? Because, if you had forecasted correctly, we could have used the money somewhere else. So that's the kind of thing which is valued under traditional modes of governance, right? Second, compliance driven. Just do the documentation, just follow the process. Yeah, everything, the process and the compliance and the documentation will take care of. And what you often see is, especially when it comes to releasing software, you have a release board or a change control board. I have seen project managers made to stand in front of a 5-member release committee, standing like an accused, having prepared about 80 to 100 pages worth of documentation and defending that documentation in front of those 5 people, right? And even if there is a single mistake in the documentation, it's thrown back at the project manager and he or she is told, come back next month when we meet again after fixing this documentation error, right? So this is all about compliance. Yeah. Next one, heavy reporting. You look at what most middle managers do uh, in a hierarchy-driven organization. In my experience, about 50 to 60% of the time goes in preparing reports for their seniors. Yeah. And what happens often? You have information which you can present it in a way which makes you look good, right? And then you end up with what is called as watermelon metrics. Yeah. I'm sure people familiar with watermelon metrics. If you imagine what a watermelon looks like, green from the outside, but nice and red from the inside. Yeah. The next one is that waterfall governance assumes reality is predictable. Yeah, you have a business case which is prepared. For example, if you're going to be preparing a business case for 2021, you would have to begin sometime in June 2020. Yeah, it takes about 6 months to go through all the processes, the approvals, etc. And then you get the budget at the beginning of January. And it is still assumed that right from the time when you prepared the business case, which was in June 2020, it is going to remain valid until December 2021, and nothing is going to change. Whatever reality you have predicted in the business case is going to pan out exactly as it is. Yeah. And the last but not the least, and I spoke about this a little bit earlier, the whole thing is about resisting change. Once the budget is given to you, once you have made your commitment to execute a plan, you got to stick to it. Yeah, regardless of what happens, you got to stick to it. If there is a new opportunity that has come, sorry, too bad. It did not show up during our annual planning exercise, so it cannot be catered to. All right. Or if something is not working, too bad. We cannot stop it, because if we stop it, then it means that we look bad, that we have to take a loss. So we have to go exactly as per plan and spend the money even when things are not working. Right. Let's now come to agile governance. First one, there is a nimbleness to pivot. What are we doing? We are trying a few things. If things work, we put more money there. If things don't work, we should stop, right? And not waste that money. Don't fall in the sunk cost fallacy and pivot. Experiments, by definition, have a risk of failure. Yeah. So some will work, some will not. And the trick is to recognize how quickly that you can pivot based on knowing what's working and what's not working. Yeah. Second one, it's all about value, right? And you can talk about value to the customer. You can talk about value to the organization. I prefer to call them benefits, but still, you could label those things like revenue, profit, market share, etc., as value to the organization. There is value to employees. There is value to all stakeholders. I think one of the characteristics of agile governance is that always focuses on delivering maximum possible value to the stakeholders as early as possible. We know that that is one of the core agile principles, right? Next one is about seeing is believing. Yeah, it's not about relying on reports. Look at every sprint or iteration. Every 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, people got to produce what they committed to. And the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. So if you attend a showcase as a leader, yeah, you will know exactly what is happening. Secondly, yes, right now, we are all working from our homes. So it's a typical situation or an exceptional situation. But if we were in office together, you would have visual indicators which would radiate the status of work that's happening within a team. And one look at the radiator would tell you what is the status of the team, the project, the work, who's working on what, where things are blocked, all of that. No need for lengthy reports. There is one and only one source of truth, right? Next one is about driven by reality. Yeah. So what we are saying is that you will always work to see how you can shorten feedback loops. You try something, see if it works. Yeah, you build on emergence. And you have to accept reality because reality always wins. Yeah, you can't fight reality for too long. And agile governance, one of the characteristics is that it is driven by reality, and it takes into consideration that we may not know a few things, but we will have to deal with them as they emerge. And the last but not the least is that it embraces change, right? So again, based on reality, based on finding out what's working, what's not working, based on feedback from customers and from the market or from any other stakeholder to whom you're delivering value, yeah, you are willing to change, you are willing to take feedback and adopt to change. Yeah. So these are the primary differences in characteristics. Let's get to some principles now. First one, agile governance favors outcomes over activity and output. Yeah. I am actually very intrigued and surprised that in organizations where I've consulted in many of them, people are not really clear between the distinction between activity outputs and outcomes. Yeah. And people often stop at measuring only activities or maximum only outputs, but do not focus on outcomes. Right. I'm not saying that you don't measure activities and outputs. Of course you do, right? But your primary measure of success should be your outcome. And that is one of the primary principles upon which agile governance is based on. Next one, value over volume. So we already spoke about the emphasis on value. The volume part is again a traditional mindset. The belief is that the more we start, the more we finish, or the more we can finish. Actually, that's not true, right? You look at so many organizations where there is so much unfinished work in process. And when we see work in process or work in progress, it carries a cost with it. So it's not about how much you get done. It's about whether those things have delivered value or not, right? And often agile governance measures volumes, right? Okay, we promised to do so many user stories or so many points or spend so much money or target so many customers, and we have done that. Yeah, and it stops at that. But the agile governance looks at what value have delivered to our stakeholders and delivering the highest value first. Next one is about trends over absolute numbers. And I think, again, this comes back to assuming whether you are predicting reality as is, and therefore you are focusing on an absolute number and being fixated with that. But what does it mean when you look at trends? Trends means that you realize that there is process variation. It's not a fixed process. For example, in a manufacturing plant, there is no point in looking at a trend, because there that the process variation has to be minimal or nil, right? But for example, if you are looking at a velocity trend, right, you know that it's going to be not a straight line, right? As one of the famous Indian industrialists said once, if something is a straight line and he was referring to the heartbeat line, it means you are dead, right? So what trends indicate is that you are not taking a knee-jerk reaction. You are looking at a pattern, and looking at patterns is one of the important things when you're looking at a complexity-driven environment as compared to a complicated environment. So agile governance focuses a lot on looking at trends rather than giving a knee-jerk reaction to an absolute number. Next one is about team success over individual success. Now, this is a big one. Now, this is not just to do with waterfall, but this is the way, our traditional HR functions are modeled upon. And this again comes from the industrial era where individual workers worked on machines, right? And the process took care of bringing everything together. So that's where individual success, individual contribution was valued. You were paid on an individual output basis as well many times. But in knowledge work, we all know that you need different skill sets within a team for something to happen. And agile governance recognizes, the fact that it is the team who delivers value. It is the team who creates success and not just one individual. The next one is about transparency and confidentiality. I spoke about this when we are talking of characteristics, right? Data should be, and information should be completely open, available to all, whether it is the CEO, whether it is the client, whether it is the project manager, whether it is the project management office. Everybody should be looking at the same piece of information, and that information should be available to one and all to see. So there is no question of, pulling out information, putting it in some format and preparing for the CEO. If the CEO needs to go look for information, yep, there should be mechanisms to pull that information out from a single source of truth. And everybody is seeing the same thing. There are no two versions of the truth. What is happening in traditional environments otherwise is there's a lot of hush-hush about information. Why? Because that information is sometimes, for a lack of better word, massaged, just converted into something which looks nicer as compared to what the reality is. And therefore, people prefer to keep reports confidential. This is a big one again. Again, I spoke about this a little bit earlier, but highlighting this fact that in agile governance, your budgeting, your funding is and should be flexible. Whereas in a traditional environment, it is all about a big bang budget. It's an annual exercise. Budget is allocated to departments, and that's it, right? So if you need an increase in a budget, it's a big, big thing to get approved. Yeah, because you already spent your money. So if there's a new opportunity that comes along, too bad. You might just miss it. Whereas the agile governance take an approach of a startup. Yeah, you give some money, show some value that you promised. If you have met your hypothesis and the promise of value, you will get more money. And if you cross that another milestone, then you will get some more. Yeah. So that is what we call about flexible budgeting. And God forbid, if your hypothesis go wrong, we cut our losses. We just stop there. We don't spend money. We spend it where we think there is more value to be got. Right. Again, coming back to reports, this is about conversations over reports. So when you are in a showcase or when you're walking past the team, you're going to have conversations with people, right? You're going to hear people, tell the story of what happened in the last iteration of the last sprint. You're going to hear the team talking about some of the impediments which they face, which will tell you as a leader what you need to do to resolve those impediments. You're here getting that information first hand. But if you don't do it that way, you rely on reports, you're going to miss out on a lot of ground level valuable information. And reports largely are focused only on numbers, right? But there is so much which numbers don't tell you. I'm sure we all know that, right? And there's a lot of stuff that can come out of conversation which a numerical report can never ever tell you. And last but not least is systems thinking over local optimization. Again, the local optimization mindset comes from a manufacturing mindset, from a traditional engineering type of mindset, where the approach was to optimize on efficiency, optimize on silos, hoping that processes will bring everything together. But when you're dealing with complexity, you've got to look at it from a systemic perspective. And one of the key principles based on which agile governance is based is you look at the entire value stream, you see which are the areas to be optimized based on the feedback that you've got, and you govern for that. You govern for removing the constraints, the blockers, which impede, teams and organizations from creating and delivering value, rather than you look at, every department and say, oh, marketing, this is your budget. How did you do? Sales, this is your budget. How did you do? IT department, this is your budget. How did you do? Right? So it's all about breaking those barriers, those artificial compartments which we have created as in form of silos, and looking at value streams to see how best you can optimize them. Right. With that, I complete my presentation and I'm open to questions. Thank you very much.
Sunil, thank you very much for that. Very much enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will jump straight to some questions. So I've had a couple come in about the Agile Manifesto. One came into you, Lizzy, and then Sunil, as you were speaking, one came into you. So let's just open it up to you both. Lizzy, I'll come to you first as Sunil has just spoken. But Sunil, once Lizzy has delivered her answer, just jump in straight away with yours. Just be mindful, I'm not going to time box you entirely, but be mindful that we've got a few questions to get through. So keep your answers relatively short. But a question has come into, as I say, to both of you. When do you feel the Agile Manifesto is going to or needs to be updated and refreshed? Lizzy.
I think if we started treating it a little bit more like a, when I say this has got so many to it, almost a little bit like a constitution, right? Because it has evolved, right? We've evolved past it just being software, but I don't know if the community, I don't know if the original creators are open to that. So I think this is the reason why we're seeing like there's a marketing manifesto, there's sales manifestos, and people are writing their amendments. The community itself is writing the amendments to it. But I think where the principles sit, the tenets, I think those tenets are great. And I think it's going to be up to us as a community to keep evolving it. So no.
Thank you. Plus one to what Lizzy said, I think you've got to look back, 20 years ago. And this manifesto was created within 3 days, 17 people getting together and aligning on that. The roots of that, being in software development. My belief is that the manifesto still holds true when it comes to software type of work. But now Agile has extended well beyond delivering software projects to every part of the enterprise. And perhaps also a recognition of the fact that, other functions play an important role as well in the value creation process or the value delivery process. So sure, there might be a room to, I would say, enhance the manifesto. I don't see a reason to, do away with the original tenets. I think they are still timeless in my view, and are still valid when it comes to, or when you're looking at it from a software creation and delivery perspective.
Thank you very much. Okay, Lizzy, what advice could you offer if seniority in my firm are pushing back against adopting Agile?
I have this little thing I deal with, this little conversation I have with executives, and I ask them this: when was the last time they saw a dinosaur? Right? And normally the response, every now and again, you get what I call a smart ass executive who will say, oh, I took my son to the zoo the other week and blah, 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 kind of thing. And we saw elephants. My response is, why did you not see a Tyrannosaurus Rex? The reason you didn't is because they were not able to evolve to the climate that had hit the earth. If organizations refuse to intentionally evolve, they will be like the dinosaurs that we see in museums. So they have an option. Do you want this organization to be here in tomorrow, or are you only trying to hold it for today? Every time I've had that conversation with boards, senior executives, there's a pause and they start to open up to pilot. Understand what you're dealing with is fear factor. Everybody's Agile nightmare story. They're not thinking about the good ones. They're thinking about the nightmare stories. So every time you're asking them to make a change and it walks in, they know they need it. They know their competition is doing it, but the nightmare stories are just so loud that they're still trying to hold on to some of the things that they believe they can predict and what they're used to. Comfort zone. But challenge them.
Thank you. Sunil, is there a danger that system thinking can be used to justify top-down control rather than allowing teams autonomy to focus on value and optimize locally? Hopefully, it is used to shape the organization and align with outcomes.
So what was the question? I'm sorry, I missed on that bit.
No problem. David, if you're there, do you want to come in and ask the question to Sunil? If not, I'm happy to ask it again. I'll ask it again. Sunil, is there a danger that system thinking can be used to justify top-down control rather than allowing teams autonomy to focus on value and optimize locally?
Okay, I mean, if you want to justify top-down control, why systems thinking, you can use any excuse, any reason to do that, right? I think the point about systems thinking is really to look at, organization as something which is interconnected in parts, where it is all about people, it's all about embracing change, it's all about dealing with emergence, right? So you have to look at something, as I said earlier, from an end-to-end value delivery perspective and see what is preventing you from delivering something faster, cheaper, better, more delightful to your customers, right? So when you are talking about that, I mean, if that means that you need to give more autonomy to teams, so be it. If that means that your funding model has to be more aligned to incremental funding, so be it. If that means that leaders need to practice servant leadership, so be it, right? So I do not see, a challenge to adopting systems thinking. But if you want to use that as an excuse to justify your behavior, yeah, then you can use any reason to justify behavior which is not aligned with agility.
Thanks, Sunil. Okay, and final question. This is coming to both of you. So Lizzy, I'll go to you first as Sunil has just spoken. How do you feel COVID-19 has changed Agile ways of working?
Oh, I think it's made us have to put up or shut up. Simply, that's what it's done, right? All of you, we can be self-organizing. We can respond to change. Can you really? Can you really? Can you really, really, really? So COVID just made us, have to admit that we were either smoking it or we were eating it, right? And those of us who were eating it and it was part of our DNA and our being, we had no problem with it. We're not saying it was easy, right? But we still had no problem with it because it's part of evolution and we're good with it, right? But those of us who were, like I said, just smoking it, oh God. I mean, you can see where they are. In my own community of trainers, right? You have no idea the crazy resistance to the idea that we had to go virtual, and people who refuse to do virtual training. It's impossible, it's impossible, it's impossible to give our experience virtually. How can we possibly say that? No, we just got to find new ways of doing it, new tools of doing it, so that when you're here, right, we still feel like we're in a room together. That's all we're talking about. But we've all had to stretch. Some of us, the stretching was a lot harder because we hadn't stretched before in a really long time. You know, it's like when you go to the gym, right? If you haven't been in for a while, oh my God, you're so sore, right? But at least you went to the gym. So I congratulate those of us who've made the stretches, even though they've been painful.
Good answer. Sunil?
Yeah, I think COVID forced us to adapt. Yeah, because if you didn't adapt, you wouldn't survive. So be it things like, learning Zoom or Mural or some of the tools, or senior managers getting used to not being able to physically see people working and having to trust people who are working from homes. Although I know there are some organizations, and I put out a rant on LinkedIn about this a while ago, that some company in the US, I mean, I don't mean to single out any country, but wherever it was, they put software on laptops to track, how long people were logged in into the laptop or some such crap, right? But leaving that aside, I think COVID has forced us to innovate, to and to adopt as well. Fortunately, we have had the technology to be able to do it, right? But again, just like it is proving, even with COVID or without COVID, technology is a huge enabler today, and it is at the core of everything that we do, even in terms of creating or delivering value. And I think for us, technology has been a boom during the COVID period, and I feel that generally organizations across the world have been able to adapt because they probably had no choice but to do it. Yes, as Lizzy mentioned, some could do it much easier than others. And you look at the adoption curve, right? You'll have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. Yeah, I think organizations also fall in the same curve. But the fact is that, yeah, everybody realized that they need to adapt. And COVID forced us to do that.
I totally agree. And as we said in our intro before the Zoom call started, boy, are we lucky that we live in a time of such advanced technology. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this week's Remote Agile London. I just want to say thank you very much to everyone for joining, and a special thank you to Lizzy and Sunil joining us from Texas and from Singapore. Two absolutely fantastic talks this morning, lunchtime and evening to wherever we are around the world. It wouldn't happen without great speakers. It also wouldn't happen without the great community joining us as well. This session has been recorded and will go onto our YouTube page. So if you came in a little bit later or want to go over it again, it'll be up on there. Again, thank you very much to everyone for joining. There is no Remote Agile London next week, but in 2 weeks' time, don't miss this one. We've got Joe Justice with us, so that should be a good one. My advice is join the session early if you want to, because we do have a limit on the number of joiners that we can have. But I just want to say thank you so much to our speakers and to everyone for joining today, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.